Let's talk about some of the other games then, because obviously there was the series of Mad Lions and G2, and
Yep.
now we've got the Rogue versus G2 one, so we can kind of preview that. Right, for the G2 Mad Lions one, I actually thought a great comment was by Dominate on Twitter, because he made this distinction, which was, I thought, pretty key, which is if you think of the other losses, like they almost lost to you guys, obviously, if you go back when they lost to Fnatic in the upper bracket in the summer, if people don't remember, that was the one where, like, they almost like had one of those games just won and like hard through at the fucking inhibitors, if you remember. Like that was a series they very much could have won when they lost to Mad Lions a year ago. That was another series where it was like a super back and forth series, again with a crazy game four. Right. Dominate's point on Twitter was every other time G2 lost in one of these scenarios, you could always just say as an analyst, like kind of the lazy analysis, like, well, they didn't play that well individually and they'll probably get it together later. I thought his point was pretty good. This Mad Lions series, they just were outclassed. Like that Mad Lions was just a better team in this series. That wasn't luck. That wasn't like, one guy had woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Like Mad Lions looked like the better team. So to me, that's a big distinction from the past G2s. What do you think, Dylan?
Yeah, and just from talking to by players as well, like they felt like just the feel of playing versus Rogue and playing versus G2, they felt like actually G2 just felt like weaker, like it felt like there's
Okay.
more opportunities, there's more plays, it's just, and even from a preparation standpoint for me, um, I do think they're not having their best few weeks right now. Um, that's just what I would say. I think Wonder hasn't had the best few weeks as well. I know he uninstalled WoW or something the other day, so maybe he's gonna start practicing a bit more. I think Caps usually in these clutch moments when he's super fed on Tristana in this first game, I think most splits he would just carry the game. Um, but he made a lot of mistakes as well. I think a lot of people are criticizing their drafting a lot. I think it's a very common thing, to just blame the drafts. Don't think the drafting was that bad. I don't like playing tier two junglers in the meta right now. That's just my personal opinion. I think it's a pretty basic one. But I think even they adapted to start picking tier one junglers in their set, and I don't think they'll make that mistake in the future. But yeah, it does seem like they're struggling a bit, and they look a bit weaker than they have in the past for sure.
What did you think, Monty?
I think it's interesting that they were blue side banning Hecarim instead of first picking it. Like I agree, and especially seeing stuff like the Trundle come out, that it's it's a bit suspect, but I don't think that their comps are necessarily bad. I understand the logic, like especially if you're G2, you're coming off that win versus you guys in game 5 and you have the Seraphine, right? Seraphine is being banned by Mad Lions, which I think is smart. Like you don't want to see them play that composition or that style again. So they try and sort of accomplish the same thing. It's like a pseudo version of that comp by putting in the Karma instead, right? Because you have the staff Moonstone Karma, which I think they were just trying to replicate that, although with more speed and less healing, right? But it's kind of a similar style, especially if you're going to go with Illusion again in the mid lane. And I can see why, if you're concerned about them having a tanky front line and your damage output, that you would pick a Trundle for the ult. So it makes like destroying a target out of position in a team, because like that's what's underrated about Trundle, I think, is like if you catch somebody out in a team fight and you pillar and then ult them, they just explode, right? They're just dead. So I think you can take certain advantages out of that situation, but to me it feels like they're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist, or they're overemphasizing that style. Because I look at the game 5 versus Schalke and I think, wow, it's cool to know that they can play this style, but should it be the definitive style? No, right? What that does is it draws a Seraphine ban out, and then I first pick Hecarim.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
right.
like
So like I feel like they're over engineering their own problem in a way, right? Like it's like, wow, we forced you to ban something that you don't want to ban because we have this wacky thing we can do that is really good. But to then have that ban and then try and do it anyway, that's what's weird to me. That's what's weird to me.
so. I think Tristana mid is probably like the strongest mid laner, if not one of the strongest mid laners in the game right now. If you can get it in a proper matchup and get resources with it, because champion pushes the lane and hyper carries with like the last whisper changes, for example, and just the way it works are just really, really, really strong. That's why you see Jinx, Tristana, like all these just hyper carries that can take over the game. Um, I actually think the blueprint of playing an enchanter bot lane and actually putting your AD carry mid lane theoretically is super good. I think I wouldn't be surprised if one day teams start doing this more commonly. because I think your Enchanter is in a lane where your Moonstone actually interacts with your support, for example.
Sure.
You're actually playing a supportive champion in a lane where there's actually another champion to like buff and support with. You can put your mid laner mid where he gets more levels and more farm early, and then put him in the side lane after, where he can get even more ahead of the state of the game. And you can actually like allocate.
It's very
your
true with Tristana too, because you actually do
with
create
Tristana especially,
a split push threat. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you can allocate your resources onto this Tristana to a way where I think this combo is really, really, really strong. I actually don't think they played it too well. I think Caps just kind of like choked the team fights. And I think it's really important if you're playing like this kind of play style. I think the matchups need to be good. I think that's really important. Like for example, when Rogue played Tristana, they just banned Orianna to first pick Tristana. And I think that's like way, way, way better than I think it was Tristana Orianna matchup in game 1 of this series.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like Triss versus Orianna, the Orianna is kind of like useful against Tristana late game as well. So.
Yeah, I think those are some really good points, and you've won me over on those notions. I just don't understand why you would then kind of sacrifice the jungle position, because it's not even necessary.
Yeah, of course.
Here's the thing. It's like I agree with the points you're making, but you don't have to actually sacrifice jungle as a result of this, because I don't think anyone's like, unless the karma draft priority like skyrockets, it's not like you're not going to get the comp that you want, right?
So the way you should draft something like this is you pick Tristana first pick, you pick jungle support 2-3, you get priority tank jungle and a support, hopefully, if you're drafting this on blue side, because you can't really let enemy pick Alistar or Rel ban 2 supports. Like this is kind of draft mechanic stuff. And then Tristana becomes a double or triple flex depending on your team between top, mid, and AD. And then it's really hard for team to draft 3 and 4 against you. And then if you want to pick Karma on 4-5 and go with it, it's fine, but you just get a better, stronger draft out of it. So
yeah, and also you're not even necessarily locked into the Karma either, because there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with drafting the Tristana or the Lucian and then playing another AD carry. That's what I don't understand about what's going on. Is it seems like I agree with you now on the concept being solid. It just seems like the execution of that concept and draft was weird.
Yeah, and in game as well, too. I think.
What didn't you like about it in game in particular?
I'd have to rewatch. I'm not sure if this is actually true, but I remember the feeling I got watching this game is like Reckless was kind of just like following around Caps and then just like kind of gold funneling him, and just like only shielding Caps in every single team fight, like really, really like role playing the I'm a support sort of thing in the game. Maybe it was actually good. Like I just remember this feeling watching the game, so I would have to like really watch it to see if it was actually good in the moments. But I think usually when Karma's played in a solo lane, it's like a supportive champion as well, but you can still like push out lanes yourself and like sometimes mantra Q the enemy as well, like this sort of stuff.
I just feel like G2 it with some slight reevaluations comes back very strong, because what was weird about this series is Mad Lions is sitting on red side and they're forced to ban Seraphine, Tristana, and Senna, all like basically all the games after the first one on red side. So it really just feels like at that point, G2, you've opened up just a massive like box of possibilities in your draft, because they're so scared of these 3 picks in particular that there's just so many power picks left over for you, right? On the blue side. You should be feeling great. You should be feeling great.
You can just like first pick Hecarim and do a Hecarim Kai'Sa game, and then just everyone presses R, the Shulk is special, and you just go in and kill them all, yeah.
Speaking of which, like, if we're going to talk about people who didn't exploit the draft, even as a layman, like, I looked at this series and I was like, why the fuck is Wunder playing these champions? Like, these champions are doing nothing in the game. This is garbage. Like, as we say, if there's all these options available, and he's a player who, in theory, will try a lot of different champions. Like, why is he playing these? Like, that Akali was having no impact on the game. You could have done anything.
Yeah, actually, Akali was played a lot in Asia recently, I think, in some of these matchups, and had some good games. I also think historically, Wonder's been a really, really good Akali in playoffs and clutch situations. But I don't know, he didn't take flash, and then he got ganked level 3 and died. So it's that my top laner also doesn't take flash sometimes, and then often the jungle comes and ganks you and you die. But I do think Ignite Akali's fine. I'm not saying it's bad. It's what happens sometimes.
They also did win that game, to be fair.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
But I
He
agree.
didn't do anything, mate.
No, it's true. Yes, I agree with you also on that point. No, I agree.
I think it's not bad, by the way. I think it's fine.
All right.
So you like the Kali
what did
Gnar
he play?
matchup?
I forget what he played in the other
Right.
games.
Game
What
1, he
Jace
played
for
Silas
Gnar?
into Gnar. Game 2, he
Oh.
played Gragas into Gnar. Game 3, he played the Akali into Gnar. And then game 4, he played Jace into Gnar.
Also, as just
So
a
it took him
question,
4 games to get to like a real fucking normal like, matchup, basically.
Yeah.
Also, why do they have? Here's my question for you, Dylan. Why do they have 4 different counters to Gnar?
Well, I think some of these Gnar. Gragas
Isn't
Gnar-
it weird? Isn't it weird as a team to come into a draft and play 4 different champions into the same matchups in 4 games? That very rarely happens.
Yeah, it does. I think Gragas versus Gnar, that's definitely a bit of a cursed matchup. Not winning. They probably just picked it because they needed a tank because they were running and they also needed AP damage, right? They're running their Lucian
Yes,
Karma
true.
trap. So it's like tank, engage, they need AP threat. So I think that's why that one came through. I think the matchup's a bit too cursed to play. Silas versus Gnar is the matchup every top laner in the world wants to play. It's their favorite matchup in ever, actually. But it's the matchup that the Gnar always seems to win for whatever reason.
Right.
Unless you are, I think it's the Shy in like one game last year, like he got like 25 kills or something. I don't know. It was really crazy.
So it's the one where the players think it's the good matchup, but as the coach, you're like, I don't want to see that.
Well, there is a point where you start winning, and you start winning hard, especially if you're ahead. So
Right.
it's a risky one. Let's just put it that way.
Well, it's also
then
it's also that the Silas copying the Gnar ult isn't gated around Mega Gnar, which is powerful.
That's
Yeah,
all
of
P as
course.
fuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
it's
So
really
basically, like the thing that makes Gnar balanced is that he doesn't have his ult in mini Gnar form, right? So when you're zooming around on Silas or like hitting people with Everfrost and chaining it into Gnar ult, it gets pretty gross in team fights.
Yeah, for sure. Like especially if you like get it on side lane and you're like 1v1ing the Gnar and he's mini and you just like ultimate to the wall. Oh, this guy's dead.
So
By the way,
that
one
is-
player I
Very
wanted
hard
to-
matchup to work, especially early.
One of the Mad Lions players I want to ask about is El Yoya, the jungler, because to me, this guy has to be one of the revelations of the year thus far. Because like last year, everyone now has retconned it that like Shadow was always something like, oh, but mate, every time he
Shadow
locked
was
in Lee Sin,
baller.
people were cleaning their pants last year.
it was
Like he was
great.
having highlight games all over the place. So the idea that you're going to get rid of him completely in some mysterious way that's never been fully explained, and bring in a guy from the RLs who had a little bit of hype behind him, but he certainly wasn't, by the way, hyped in the way that like Selfmade is. I'd even say a player like Tinks was maybe hyped more than El Yoya, but he's not only come in, he hasn't missed a fucking beat. He looks better and better as the split goes on, and how integrated he seems to be in their team is ridiculous. So give me some thoughts. What do you think about this, Dylan?
I spoke with him to a bit during the off season. I think he's very, very good. I think that a lot of people behind the scenes actually did hype him a lot.
Okay.
I think it probably wasn't like something the Twitter people were talking about or like stuff like this, but I think behind the scenes in the actual orgs themselves, I think that he was a very, very, very sought after player and wanted player. And yeah, this kid just comes in, goes one split in the second division Spain league, goes to first division Spain league MVP, and then just top 2 solo queue the whole year while getting double MVPs in national leagues. I think a lot of teams that were paying attention knew he would be quite good. And I think it was a really good fit for him at Mad Lions as well. Team that's really good at working with rookie players, had already like onboarded a bunch of rookies and been very successful with them, as well as like a Spanish org as well, really good, and one of the top orgs. And it was like a good fit for him. And yeah, this guy is like skyrocketing, no? Like from in 2 years or something.
I thought it was especially impressive that his first kind of LEC stage performance was one where, speaking of teams that we were talking about how you adapt, I really liked the way that Mad Lions was playing against Rogue in their series because it felt like the Volibear pick was enabling a lot of plays because when we were talking about Rogue earlier, when they like to kind of pull it back a little bit when there isn't an objective on the map or they're not playing anything, the Volibear allowed them just to like dive Larson and like kind of prevent that style of play or accelerate the gameplay in a way that seemed to make Rogue very uncomfortable. And he was making some like really bold plays from like Raptor Pit into mid lane, and to have him kind of be the keystone of that strategy as a rookie on a big stage for the first time in playoffs was really impressive to me.
Yeah, I said on the broadcast actually, like Volibear can do dives and make plays in those moments that no other champ can because of like the whole turret thing. And it was cool to see him just like really, really going for it in his first best of 5 on stage.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like, I wouldn't have expected that level of composure from a player like Elyoya, given his limited playtime at the top level and also limited playtime on a stage like that, which can give players jitters. And yeah, I mean, it just continued over the course of the series. And I think right now, if we're looking forward to the finals next week, Mad Lions has convincingly beaten Rogue. They've convincingly beaten G2, which were the teams that most people would have guessed would have been in the finals.
Yeah, of course.
And so, and like, because they were 3-1s and because the games themselves, you know, with the eye test looked very dominant from Mad Lions. Yes. Now we're suddenly in a conversation, which is, are they the favorites for the LEC?
Yeah, I'd say right now, probably. Behind the scenes, they've always, I think, probably been the best team, Grims, that we played against, at least. That I always felt that way watching them play. So seeing them finally like stop throwing the games and getting some good reads on the meta for draft as well, it's just like, I don't know, they're just playing really, really well. I wouldn't be surprised if they win, but I think any team that has like Caps Reckless on it, you always need to kind of think about that too. And then
I also think just based on our conversation, like there's just a couple things you do differently in draft, and all of a sudden G2 becomes really terrifying.
And I honestly, like, I'm talking to the players, my players, they said that like Rogue felt really, really difficult to play against as well, and that they're actually quite good the way they play around like their jungler and pushing their lanes. So I honestly could see a universe in which any of these 3 teams wins.
All right, let's get some thoughts then on the G2 Rogue matchup, because this is the one where coming in, like a lot of people, I know your team obviously ended up overperforming what people's expectations. A lot of people, I think, were in a similar camp to me. It was like, right, this split's basically, can Rogue play against G2? If they can, maybe we'll have some fun in playoffs. Otherwise, it's just going to be G2 waltzing and winning the league. Well, now, like, they play, but they're only going to play this low bracket matchup, so we're not even going to get the 2 matchups that we maybe could have had in this format, right? Who do you actually favour going into this one? Like you've said before, and your players said it, like, at times in the game, G2 feels vulnerable. Like they feel beatable now. Like, who do you have winning this one out of Rogue and G2, Dylan? Who do you favor?
Honestly, I'm not too sure. I think I would give G2 just the credit. I think just from sheer roster strength and having a full week to like really analyze what went wrong, what style they want to play, and go in with a plan, and being able to perform under like that sort of a pressure scenario. I would give it to G2, but I think so far in playoffs, Rogue has definitely played. I think Rogue has played better than G2 so far.
I agree with that. I think I've especially this last weekend, I thought Rogue's performance looked much more on point, and I feel like they were kind of
also doesn't look as bad to lose to Mad Lions now, Monty. It looked pretty bad when the playoffs began and you had a top seed. Now all of a sudden it's looking all right to lose to Mad Lions. You know, fair play.
I thought that they were thrown for a loop by what Mad Lions was doing to them.
The draft and they get what they want and they win a game first couple of games. Probably beat anyone back. They could also lose to a lot of teams, it feels like.
Cool. Well, that will, I think, wrap up some of the LEC discussion. Unless you want to make a bold prediction on the finals, you think G2 is still going to be the favorite if they end up heading to finals, or is this Mad Lions? Are we seeing the kind of changing of the guard from the traditional Fnatic G2 dominance?
I think Mad Lions will win, actually.
One thing I think would be cool though is, listen, I actually personally think just for the sake of like Mad Lions getting like legitimacy if they win, I think it would help if they get to play G2 again just because of the storyline and, you know, they're like the champions of the play. Yeah. Obviously that would help the thing. But if there's a world where Rogue beats G2 in the final, it's Mad Lions versus Rogue. I tell you what, considering everyone hyped the fact that G2 being the best team in the world in 2019, you know, like changed the game. It didn't really. It just made people think LEC's best team can be better. The real game changer would be if you have these particular cores of players contending for the championship like a year into coming into the league. Like that's crazy. Like in my opinion, that would be the very interesting sort of like sea change of how maybe people even think of LEC.
But these 2 teams were first and second place last summer, right?
Sure.
Like in regular season.
In the regular split,
they were at the top of the league with a huge gap between them and G2. Like it's not unheard of, right? But G2 was just very, very clutch in the playoffs, and it's G2, so they turn it on when it matters.
Yeah, that's what I mean though, because that was the sentiment though. It's like, but who cares in the best of ones? Because yeah, G2 and Fnatic will always be in the final, blah blah blah. If that's not even the case at all now, I'll be very interested to see the coming years in terms of how people think of their veteran names. Like, will they just go for rookie talent even more so? I could see a world where people just go based off eye test now.